Virginia Democrats are moving forward with several bills they say are meant to reduce gun violence in the Commonwealth.
The Virginia House has just passed not one, not two, not three, but 8 gun control bills.
The ruling class just can't seem to avoid trying to trample all over and infringe all of our firearm rights.
Taking on gun control with big reforms passed through committees on party line votes.
And one of those changes would ban assault weapons.
They range from restrictions on the types of guns you can own to where Virginians can bring them.
Cannot ban an entire class of firearms that are commonly chosen by law-abiding citizens.
One date. One single date buried deep inside 2 bills moving through Virginia's legislature right now could permanently end your ability to own the most popular rifle in America if you live in the Commonwealth. And here's what makes this truly alarming. Most gun owners in Virginia have no idea it's coming. Virginia has long been considered one of the safest states in the country for Second Amendment rights, the birthplace of the Bill of Rights itself. A Commonwealth where gun ownership wasn't just tolerated, it was woven into the cultural fabric. But something fundamental has changed in Richmond, and the speed at which it's happening should concern every gun owner in every state, not just Virginia. Because what's unfolding right now isn't just a local policy shift, it's a test case. And if it works here, your state could be next. For years, Virginia gun owners had a backstop, a governor willing to veto restrictive legislation before it could become law. Glenn Youngkin served as that firewall, blocking dozens of gun control measures during his time in office, but his term is over. And the person who replaced him has a very different philosophy. Governor Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer who ran with heavy backing from gun control organizations like Everytown for Gun Safety, has made her position crystal clear. She is not going to be reaching for the veto pen, not on this issue. And that single change at the top has completely unleashed the Democratic majority in the General Assembly. They aren't just introducing new gun legislation, they're resurrecting every single bill Youngkin killed and pushing them through at breakneck speed. Years of pent-up legislative energy is now flooding the system all at once. Now, the centerpiece of this entire effort is something you need to understand in detail because the way it's written is specifically designed to capture the widest possible range of firearms. We're talking about House Bill 2127 and its Senate companion, SB 749. These bills introduce a sweeping ban on what the state is calling assault firearms. And before you roll your eyes at that term, let me explain why the definition they're using is so much more dangerous than what you might expect.
Virginia Democrats are moving forward with several bills they say are meant to reduce gun violence in the Commonwealth.
We could be looking at the perfect storm of Second Amendment cases all landing in front of the Supreme Court at the same time.
Stricter gun laws took another step to become reality, passing the Senate just a few days ago. The bill would prevent the sale of certain firearms.
What they've done now is they have modified their assault weapons ban so that it touches not just assault weapons, but magazines.
We support the bill. We do not think weapons of war have a place on our street.
One of the most sweeping changes would end the sale of assault weapons. Think AR-15s.
They take things millions of Americans own legally, relabel them as dangerous, and then they change the definition.
Under this legislation, a semi-automatic centerfire rifle is classified as an assault firearm if it can accept a detachable magazine and has even one additional feature. Just one. A folding or telescoping stock qualifies. A pistol grip qualifies. A threaded barrel that could accept a muzzle device qualifies. Think about that for a second. They didn't write this to target some exotic military weapon. They wrote it to capture your standard AR-15, your AK pattern rifle. Essentially every modern semi-automatic rifle sitting on gun store shelves across the Commonwealth right now. But it doesn't stop at rifles. The bill also sweeps in semi-automatic shotguns that have revolving cylinders or can accept detachable magazines. So that home defense shotgun you thought was safe from this kind of legislation, it might not be. They even went after magazines, prohibiting the sale of anything holding more than 10 rounds if it was manufactured after a specific cutoff date. And that cutoff date is where this whole thing becomes truly devastating. July 1st, 2026. Here's how the trap works, and I'm calling it a trap because that's exactly what it is. Starting on that date, the importation, sale, manufacture, purchase, and transfer of these newly classified assault firearms becomes illegal in Virginia. Now, there is a grandfather clause. If you already own one of these firearms and it was manufactured before July 1st, 2026, you can keep it. But And this is the part that changes everything. You cannot transfer it. You can't sell it to your neighbor. You can't give it to your hunting buddy. And in most cases, you can't even pass it down to your own children.
Now, Democrats in the General Assembly also pushing ahead with one of their most controversial gun control measures, the ban on assault weapons.
Two guns can function the exact same way. One's legal, one's illegal because of how it looks.
Major Second Amendment case is before the Supreme Court today.
Multiple other rifle and magazine ban challenges are lining up for that same exact conference in the Supreme Court.
This is not some gun rights attorney saying it. This is the U.S. government admitting it. They're saying these laws don't survive Bruen.
The exceptions are so narrow they barely exist. What this means in practical terms is that the state has put an expiration date on these firearms, not by confiscating them today, but by ensuring they die with their current owners. Every year that passes after 2026, there will be fewer and fewer of these guns in legal circulation in Virginia. Within a generation, they'll be functionally extinct in the Commonwealth, and that is entirely by design. So who exactly is driving this? The primary architects are State Senator Saddam Salim and Delegate J.J. Singh. Senator Salim has been particularly outspoken, framing gun violence as an epidemic and repeatedly arguing that so-called weapons of war don't belong on Virginia's streets. He's faced significant pushback from critics who say his legislative priorities reflect the restrictive models of other nations, rather than the traditions embedded in America's founding documents. On the opposing side, Senator Mark Peake has been one of the most vocal opponents, calling the bill a direct violation of the Second Amendment and arguing that this is precisely the kind of government overreach the right to bear arms was designed to prevent. But let's talk about what happens to you personally if this passes and you make a mistake. Because the penalties are structured in a way that creates maximum risk for ordinary gun owners. A violation is classified as a Class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia, which carries up to 12 months in jail and significant fines. That alone is serious. But the real damage comes from what happens after conviction. If you're found guilty of violating this statute, even once, even on a technicality, you lose your right to possess any firearm for 3 full years, not just the banned ones, all of them. Every shotgun, every hunting rifle, every handgun in your safe becomes illegal for you to touch. One technical violation of a features-based ban, and the state strips you of your entire ability to defend yourself and your family. This is designed to make gun ownership so legally perilous that people simply stop participating. It turns law-abiding citizens into criminals through complexity and bureaucratic traps that are nearly impossible to navigate perfectly. Now here's where things get really interesting from a legal standpoint, because on paper, this ban appears to be on a collision course with the United States Constitution. The Supreme Court's decisions in Heller and more recently in Bruen have established clear principles. The government cannot ban firearms that are in common use for lawful purposes. There are over 20 million AR-style rifles in civilian hands across this country. Calling them unusual or dangerous in a legal sense is an argument that simply doesn't survive scrutiny under current Supreme Court precedent.
So we are heading towards one of the most important Supreme Court moments for gun rights in many years.
For a decade, there was a ban on so-called assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines.
We've got to have good mental health screenings, and we've got to have appropriate judicial oversight.
They start comparing civilian firearms to military, like the military doesn't use pistols, knives, who civilians are already allowed to own.
The Bruen decision went even further, requiring the government to demonstrate a historical tradition of similar regulation from the founding era to justify modern restrictions. And spoiler, there is no historical tradition of banning standard bearable arms from 1791. It doesn't exist. But here's the problem. The Supreme Court doesn't hear every case. And the lower courts that will handle challenges to this Virginia law first have not exactly been friendly to gun rights. Virginia sits in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has a track record of hostility towards Second Amendment claims. We've watched courts in Illinois and Maryland perform extraordinary legal gymnastics to uphold similar bans, even after Bruen made the constitutional standard abundantly clear. The hope is that the Supreme Court will eventually take up an assault weapons ban case directly, and many legal analysts believe that could happen in the 2026 or 2027 term. But that timeline means the Virginia ban could take full effect before the highest court in the land has a chance to weigh in, and in the meantime, people's rights hang in the balance. There's also a cultural dimension to this fight that's impossible to ignore. If you look at where these bills' sponsors come from, you'll notice a pattern. The strongest support comes from Northern Virginia, places like Fairfax County and Falls Church, areas densely populated with federal government employees and beltway professionals. There is a stark cultural divide between these suburban districts and the rural parts of Virginia where firearms are a daily part of life, where hunting and self-reliance aren't political statements but simply how people live. The legislators from these northern districts aren't just responding to their constituents' preferences, they're advancing a vision of governance where the population is managed by credentialed experts and where individual armament is viewed as an anachronism. This isn't merely a policy disagreement, it's a fundamental clash over what kind of country America is going to be. So what does all of this mean going forward? Every indication suggests these bills will reach the governor's desk and that she will sign them. When that happens, the clock officially starts ticking toward July 1st, 2026. Between now and then, expect a surge in firearms purchases across Virginia as people rush to acquire what they can before the window closes permanently. Legal challenges will be filed immediately, but injunctions are far from guaranteed, especially in the Fourth Circuit. The state is banking on the reality that most individuals don't have the financial resources to wage a multi-year legal battle. They're counting on attrition, they're counting on fatigue, they're counting on the next generation growing up in a world where these firearms simply aren't available and therefore aren't missed. And that's the real strategy here. This isn't just about Virginia. Every gun control organization in the country is watching Richmond right now. They're studying the legislative language, the political dynamics, the court responses. If this model works in Virginia, a state with deep Second Amendment roots, it becomes the template for replication everywhere. State after state after state. The definitions are written, the deadlines are set, the penalties are waiting. The only remaining question is whether the legal system and the people of Virginia will allow this to stand unchallenged. If you care about this issue, now is the moment to pay attention. Not next year, not when the deadline is a month away, right now. Because by the time most people realize what's happened, the gates will already be closed. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.